My name is Elizabeth McIntyre. I'm one of the co-directors of Screencraft Works, and I'm here with my co-director, Rebecca Del Tufo. I'm a white middle-aged woman with light brown hair and glasses, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm thrilled to be inviting you to this excellent conversation this evening, which is looking at and discussing the topic of multi-role filmmaking versus single discipline. Which is the best approach? Are there pros and cons to both approaches? So let me tell you a little bit about Screencraft Works. We're a not-for-profit virtual community for cross-border mentoring, cross-border talks, and cross-border networking for those who identify as underrepresented, working in production and post-production. Our cross-border conversations are for sharing knowledge across different countries, offering different insights from different perspectives. And our speakers are drawn from the Screencraft Works community.
Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. My name is Natasha Griffiths. I am a writer, director, educator. But first, I am a beach-loving, people-loving country girl from Manchester, Jamaica. Currently live and work in Kingston. Who is simply just curious about people, curious about why people do the things they do, what drives them to make the decisions that they make, which is essentially my jumping off point into writing and storytelling and whatnot. I have a bachelor's degree in acting. That's where I started. And then discovered later on, I want to say later on in life, but I wasn't that old at the time. I was in my early 20s. I discovered film and television. And so I pursued a Bachelor of Fine Arts in screenwriting. I professionally took on the world of writing, directing from there on.
Hi, so my name is Jack Goessens. I have short dark hair and glasses. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And I am an editor in high-end drama. My most recent credit was UK editor on Outlander. I also, because that's the topic of this conversation, make my own work on the side as a writer-director. So I'm developing my first feature, Boyfriend, at the moment. And I'm doing that with Screen Scotland and Short Circuit. So I'm based in Scotland. I've been here for 13 years, but I'm originally from the Netherlands. As much as I'm in Scotland, I kind of move around the UK. Like I work in London as well. A lot of post-production ends up happening in London. So I go up and down.
My name is Jendayi Omowale. I go by she, her, or they, them pronouns, and I'm a Black woman with sort of curly Beyonce hair going on. And yeah, I am a documentary filmmaker, journalist, and photographer. I graduated with honors from New York University doing journalism. So that's kind of where I got my start with I want to say more documentary work and writing work. And I just submitted my dissertation a couple weeks ago, but I have an MPhil in world history from Cambridge University. So right now I'm in the UK, but usually I'm in New York, and that's kind of my home base. And yeah, I have a documentary series called Black Arrogance, and it's about Black artists and art history. I have a podcast series called Black Radicals, which is sort of serving intellectual leaders in the Black community. And I'm currently a junior staff writer at Impact Media, which is, I want to say, sort of very social justice oriented type of journalism work.
That's awesome. And one of the things that I like is that we're all spread out. We're across the world, but across the discipline of filmmaking too. And I had a chance to look at some of Jack's work and Jendayi's work, and I must say, impressive. But I am curious. One of the things I'd like to share, and I'm curious to hear from you guys as well, is what was the moment, if there was a moment where this idea of becoming a storyteller, a filmmaker, kind of sparked for you? What's the genesis?
I don't really have a single moment, so I guess I can kind of talk about my kind of journey, and there's been several moments that kind of pushed me forward. So I guess it all kind of started. I was kind of obsessed with film and TV when I was younger, and I started teaching myself editing when I was 14, I think. Just making kind of YouTube videos, cutting together film and TV shows into like new music videos. And then but I did a lot of acting, so I kind of thought I was going to be an actor, and then when I finished high school I wanted to apply for drama school, but people aren't very like enthusiastic about doing arts when you're kind of good. I was good at school, like I was good at maths and science and stuff, and they were like, please don't do this. So I got a degree in business and economics, kind of thinking I could maybe do the business side of film. I thought I could maybe be a producer, and then at the same time I also studied a kind of like part-time writing degree in Belgium. I kind of thought that would make sense. So with that, I then got into film school after the economics degree, and the film school had a specialism in producing, so it was kind of a natural progression there. But within the first few months when I produced a film, I thought, oh no, I definitely don't want to do this. So then I kind of returned back to editing, because that was one of the other specialisms. And that's kind of been me ever since. And while I guess because I kind of started with the kind of acting when I was younger, that's always informed me wanting to write and direct. Like, it was like I don't really want to be in front of the camera anymore, but I quite enjoyed being behind the camera, because I guess I guess I skipped a bit. I would make films so that I could act in them, and then I realized, no, actually, this is more fun. I'll just direct them. Yeah, so that's kind of where the two have come from.
Naturally, I'm also attracted to this whole idea of you acting, and then kind of progressing into that, because I had a fairly similar beginning, fancied that I was going to become the actress. I did become an actress. But it was this curiosity for me when I was younger. Yes, through high school, I was just curious about people. Like, I wanted to understand them. I wanted to walk in their shoe. I'm a bit of an empath, and so kind of acting gave me an opportunity to do that, an avenue to do that. And so I did that as undergrad. And then I was all during undergrad, I was also doing some introductory film courses. Prior to that, film was just entertainment. It was just, I watch these things because they're fun, they're engaging. I never imagined about making them. So it was not until like my second year of undergrad, my third year of undergrad, I was doing with my acting, I was doing some introductory film courses. And one day, one of the teachers screened Amores Perros, that's Alejandro Gonzalez's film, the 2000 film. And I was like, hold up, wait a minute. People can make this? People can do this? I can do this, because culturally, Mexico, Jamaica, we're similar. There's a lot of similarity culturally. And so I'm like, oh, and I think that was where this idea, the very first idea of being a filmmaker sparked. And I had one of those epiphanies, and like the sky opened up. Ah! And I was like, I want to direct movies. Mark you, I never understood really what it meant to direct movies at that point. But I remember the moment I want to direct movies. And so my journey into filmmaking kind of started from there.
So, I mean, somewhat similarly, I also found like my path through school. So basically, I want to say up until like I want to say sophomore year of my undergrad, I had no plans at all of being like in film and TV. I would probably honestly like laugh in your face if you told me like that I would be involved in this industry. I was very much like, I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. My two biggest inspirations at the time, and I mean still are Maya Angelou and Jamaica Kincaid. And like that was me. Like I was just like, I want to be a writer, I want to publish, and that was that. But then in my sophomore year of undergrad in the journalism course for NYU, they basically force you to do like a multimedia course. And that's because when you do your course in junior year, you have to choose between if you're doing print journalism or like some form of multimedia, whether it be audio, video, or audio or video or photojournalism. And so we have a multimedia course where they basically make you do all of these different projects. So we did like an audio journalism project, a photojournalism project, a print journalism project. And then our final for that was actually that we had to make a documentary. And so my documentary was about gentrification's effects on the Black hair industry in New York City. And it kind of came about because I'm very familiar with New York. I've been going like back and forth my whole life from the Caribbean. And so like obviously like especially when you are in the Caribbean neighborhoods of New York, so that's like a lot of neighborhoods in Brooklyn like Bed-Stuy, and then if you get like more Latino Caribbean, there's like a lot in like Harlem and Washington Heights. You will start to notice like over the years, as I had, that like a lot of these areas were becoming completely gentrified, and a lot of the communities and institutions that were built in these areas had slowly like withered away. And so like me and my girlfriends would kind of talk about like how now you had to like travel so far kind of just to get your hair done and things like that. And I felt like at the time in New York, there was a lot of conversation about gentrification. And then of course we do also have our like, legacy media about Black hair, because it is known how important hair is to the Black community. And I feel like that's a well-known fact everyone knows. So I felt like this documentary would be a great way to tie both of those issues together, because I feel like no one, even though obviously like the connection is implicit, I felt like no one explicitly made that connection. And it was a really like crazy process. Like I definitely had at least one nervous breakdown like making that documentary, but having the opportunity to talk to all of these different like Black women and Black women from like a variety of places. So like Caribbean immigrant women, African immigrant women, African American women whose families had lived in New York for generations, and so on and so forth. Just getting to hear like the diversity of their stories, even like slight things like the sound of their laughter, or like the way that they look when they're telling certain things. I just started to realize that like, not accessing like multimedia forms of journalism, not, being behind the camera and things like that, not being a photographer, is actually doing a disservice to my storytelling, because I just started realizing that this level of storytelling is incredibly important, and it brings, I feel like it brings audience like a new level of emotionality and vulnerability that you sometimes don't get with print. So yeah, then from there I was like, okay, like I want to be like a documentary or like I want to be a documentary filmmaker, I want to be a filmmaker, but I have no clue, like when I'm doing this was not really my plan. And so then when I continued, I took on the video journalism track. So I did like more, I would do like weekly news stories and things like that and get more practice. And then for my senior year thesis, that's basically how I started the documentary series I had now. The Black cyber art space was just me sort of like surveying these different communities that were impacted by COVID-19, and basically how like Black owned our institutions were adapting, because that was also, as well as COVID-19, that was also the time of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And so there were a lot of intersectional needs that a lot of these Black owned art institutions were having to address, or like addressing their communities. And I felt like that was something that needed to be touched. And that basically sort of led into my whole Black Arrogance documentary series, where I sort of then profiled a lot of Black artists, and then also go into like Black art history and sort of like the cultural history of Black Indigenous art forms, like again, either in Africa, Caribbean or the United States.
Here we are 100 years later, we have another pandemic, and it feels like we're going to have a Harlem Renaissance 2.0.
What's special about the salon is that it's not just a place to express extreme grief. If you have to, you can. But a lot of what we do predominantly is we build joy.
All right, George Floyd has just been murdered. Breonna Taylor is blowing up, and I'm sort of just like, something's boiling inside of me.
Basically, like the three people that you saw, they owned like 3 different Black-owned art institutions within New York. Ariel is the owner of the Salon, and she is based in Harlem or the Bronx. And basically they service like Black, Indigenous, and other people of color artists. And they're very much like an art collective that's very much like, we own the labor, we own the means of labor, and also we're going to like directly sell our art or create networks within New York spaces. Another one, the first person I interviewed who talked about the Harlem Renaissance, his name is Doji, and he's actually really cool because he was not going to be in my documentary at first. I was just walking around Harlem and I was doing like B-roll and stuff, and he saw me and I noticed that he was like in an art gallery, and he came and he was like, hey, like this is my art gallery, like what are you doing and stuff like that. He was just curious, and I was like, whoa, like you're perfect because I'm trying to survey like Black-owned art institutions and things like that. And he had a really cool story. I forgot which specific African country he was from, but he had a really cool story basically where like he came over, he made it as an immigrant, he also went to NYU, and then he wanted to own this like Black-owned art space, which he does with his wife. And they basically started doing all of this really cool programming during like COVID-19 and things like that. And then the third person was this really cool girl at NYU. Her name is Morgan, and she started basically like the first people of color like collegiate art institution. So there was not really, especially at NYU, there was not really any specific art organizations that were for people of color that are specifically going to college. So she started that, and again, like also started it with like COVID-19, all of us sort of like feeling this new like racialized pressure in the United States with the Black Lives Matter incidents. And yeah, it was really cool because there were so many interesting things they had, like art fundraisers, the creation of like these very unique online spaces and things like that that were, you know, intersectional and catering to Black and Indigenous needs during that time.
Really powerful stuff. Your work, I appreciate that your work is centered around essentially Black activism, Black art, Black activism. Jack has worked on high-end dramas, but I noticed that the ones that he has written and directed are more personal stories. And I know Jack wants to share something about something that he has written, directed, you know.
How long has it been?
5, 6, no, 8 years.
I haven't talked to my sister in 15 years. I had a friend back home, Bianca.
I met this girl at work, Layla. I just wish they could see me. I wish I could show them.
Show them what?
So I have to add with who I am now. I didn't write that one. I just directed that one. But it was written by a very talented writer called Michael Richardson, BAFTA winner. So, you know, amazing material to be working with. But the reason that I came on board with this is because it's about trans stories. And a lot of the work that I do as a director or writer focuses on trans lives. So similar to you, Jendayi, you know, I'm trying to kind of create awareness and kind of more, at this point, kind of like more understanding, because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding about trans lives and that kind of stuff. So I guess that's also one of those things that pushes me away from editing, because in my editing job, that's not something that I can do anything with, basically. So then you know, I kind of scratch that itch, that kind of need to talk about these subject matters when in my own work, essentially.
Yeah, actually, so I actually have a question for you, Jack, because so I'm not trans. I identify as sort of as a non-binary, but also Black woman. I have a whole article going into like that. Yeah, no, it's serious, guys. Like I can't even get into it right now. But basically, I do, you know, being in the LGBT community, I do also identify as bisexual. I try my best to be sort of like, an ally is like one thing, but just like honestly, a lot of my work does tend to survey like a lot of like trans people of color, because that's kind of just like a community I'm surrounded by and people I know. And so I'm curious, because since you're saying that you also sort of focus a lot in about like the trans community in your work, like if you would have any advice to people like me who are more like cis-assumed or just sort of like more coming from like an ally perspective, like any tips or guidance of like how to go about treating, you know, when you're covering like the trans community in a nuanced way, in a way that, you know, feels like it's accurate representation.
Yeah, I think that I feel really strongly about kind of like perspective, if that makes sense. You know, one thing that I would talk about with my work that is that it's very much like an insider's perspective, but it's also very much like my perspective. So I can't speak for all trans people. So, you know, I feel like for people who are not within the community, it's the kind of reverse. It's you know, emphasize this is my kind of outsider's perspective, and trying to kind of like educate yourself within that, and also finding like collaborators. You know, for example, as much as I said earlier, I can't do as much with it in editing. I have edited short films for other trans people, and then we're working together on that kind of stuff. So, you know, you can find other crafts, you know, trans people within those crafts that you could collaborate with, for example.
As for me, my stories, the focus of my stories tend to be personal stories, not necessarily personal to me, but tangential experiences as well. Culturally idiosyncratic stories. And when I say culturally, I'm talking about Jamaican stories, but not just Jamaican stories, Caribbean stories, in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, but also in the diaspora. I'm also a Christian, and so I've started a series, and my first feature film, Lukewarm, actually explores the I want to say intersectionality, but essentially it is a woman of faith, a staunch woman of faith, who kind of finds herself at this juncture in her life where she is experiencing affections towards another woman, and kind of how the film explores how she reconciles the two things. You know, how she reconciles her faith and her love for God and her devotion for God with what she understands is homosexuality and LGBTQ and thing. And it's been a journey in discovering for me as a writer, and I'm so excited to make that movie. I am so excited to make that film. But and it is set in Jamaica within a subcultural space called revivalism. Is a religious space called revivalism. It's very vibrant. It's very yeah, it's exciting, and I'm excited to make a film. But what I want to share a clip. Well, we can show the flyer, and then we can show the clip. Is actually my second directorial exploration. My second film as a writer director, Home Sweet Home.
Someone come to see you.
Hello, Esme. How is things?
I don't know what to tell you, but I have no idea who this man is. What happened to Jonah?
4th stage lung cancer. Him don't have long. All him want to do is see you, Esme.
I have a life right here. I can't leave. If I leave, I can't come back.
The film is essentially about a Jamaican immigrant in Brooklyn, New York, who fled Jamaica many, many years prior because she got herself into some hot water. Not to say that's the circumstance under which everybody leaves the country, but in this specific circumstance, she got herself in some hot water, had to kind of flee by night. And many, many moons later, here comes her. She leaves her child back in Jamaica and has been excommunicated from the child for several 30 something years. And here comes this ghost from her past. And so, yeah, that is that film. And it's one of the films that I'm most proud of so far because of what I've made so far. It's come the closest to what I envisioned writing it and what I envisioned directing it. So, yeah. That is one example of what I have made. And I want to segue if that's okay into, because on this particular project on Home Sweet Home, I was writer, I was director, and I ended up editing as well. I did not want to edit. I can tell you that much. I had my editor put down and she was excited, but life happened. And I ended up writing, directing, and editing. And there were challenges doing all three of them, and there were wins doing all three of them. So I kind of want us to jump off into that, a discussion about that, like what for you and in your experience is being a hyphenated filmmaker, editor, writer, director, producer, whatnot. Is that, did you find that to be a necessity?
So basically, with documentary, like especially like like if you're coming out of journalism school, you do have to learn how to do everything yourself. That's how they train you. And so yeah, especially when I was starting out, I was literally doing everything. So I'd be doing the directing, writing the script that I would be saying, editing it, finding my interviewee sources, release forms, like literally everything. And that's just because that's kind of really how a lot of the journalism industry is. Like, even when you do get hired, like you may have a team, but for the most part, when you're hired as a journalist, people do expect you to know like how to do everything and be able to do it under a deadline. So that's kind of how I was trained. And I was honestly kind of like stuck on that idea, like that I wanted to keep doing everything. I was like, I'm going to be the next like Steven Soderbergh. And for anyone who doesn't know who that is, like he's that white guy and he does everything. Like that's like his trademark, to be honest. So I was like, that was going to be me. But then, as I started gaining like more practical experience in film and TV, like I was like a production assistant on like Law and Order SVU for a bit and like a Universal Film and different stuff like that. I started to see, obviously, right, like now the other end of that, which is like how sets look like when you are spending like millions of dollars on a specific project. And I think that having that sort of perspective as a production assistant sort of like made me see like, a lot of great projects are made with a great team. And so I started to think, I guess, more specifically on like where I would fit or like what would be my ideal like team membership role versus like people or skill sets that I should, start thinking of people where I want to fill that role in my projects. And I think so far for me, the answer to that ended up being like, I really still want to continue on being like directing and editing. I've been like an assistant director on a few projects. I've directed my own projects and I've edited my own projects and have also done freelance editing for other people. And I noticed that like directing and editing and like the subcategories of that, assistant directing, assistant editing, like those are the things I do tend to enjoy the most, regardless of whether or not it's a project or someone else's. And I was second assistant camera on this shoot in upstate New York and never again. That was like the worst. So traumatizing. Like I still have flashbacks of like the lens cases and like holding the camera. Never again. So after that experience, I was like, okay, so like I think like camera cinematographer, I would probably always like want to go and hire someone for that. Of course, still, especially like with my own documentary series, I'm still usually the one like shooting and everything like that. And I do like camera, but I more just like it for like photojournalism and photography. I just think that like cinematography is a really I would go ahead and seek that out. But I think that's sort of just like right? The process of being a filmmaker, which is just sort of like you try all of these different hats out, you try a bunch of things, and then you slowly start to realize like what you gravitate towards and what you don't. And also, you know, also just like what you have to do out of necessity, because for some projects you do kind of have to be the person who does everything or has their hand in every pot, basically.
It's really funny what you're saying about Steven Soderbergh, because what I've kind of had in the UK, very much in the UK kind of like high-end drama industry, I would say, it's very much frowned upon to do multiple things. So it's kind of, you know, me kind of editing and writing, directing, I pretty much get asked about it constantly. I have to kind of defend it constantly. The usual assumption is that I kind of don't really want to edit and I actually just really want to direct, which isn't, I mean, it's not true. For me, the two are really, they're really, really connected. You know, the one thing that people do agree on is that they inform each other. You can learn a lot. You know, you can learn so much about directing from editing, but I think vice versa as well. And I think that people don't underestimate is that it's also really beneficial to have like a double the network, because you're meeting people in you know, one craft and also in the other craft that you can kind of like use for either. Another thing, I'm kind of finding that you know, you were kind of mentioning earlier about like you have to, I guess, you know, that's kind of like two-sided, where it's like sometimes you can't find the person to do that role, but it's also kind of you have to sometimes from like a financial point of view, as in, you know, you kind of have to pay the bills and that kind of stuff, which I think you know, that's a really important thing as well.
I think it's interesting, Jack, that in the UK, that sort of hyphenated role, the hyphenated roles are kind of, you know, looked down upon, because I think between our sister brother US and the Caribbean and all, I mean, third world or developing countries, we wear that as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
because there's a glorification of the author, so we kind of want to do all things. I am not that person. I am not that person. So my first love is writing. My jumping off point is always going to be writing. Directing, I happened upon out of necessity and realized, yes, I have capacity for it. And I do love it too, because it gives you some kind of control over what you see that you're writing on a page. So I think one of the benefits of kind of having these multiple roles involved in your creative process is that sometimes when we're doing everything, we become a little bit myopic, you know, and there are things that we don't see. And so we're not benefiting from the creative input that can elevate the work. So there's something the editor is going to see, an experience the editor is going to have that will inform how they do a particular cut.
The clip from the film that I played earlier, the reason that I was brought on as director with that one was because it was specifically a trans story, and I was kind of brought on. It's quite unusual for a short for it to be that way. Editors are preferred to be editors and not do anything else. But actually, what I've found with a lot of up and coming directors is that they like it that I also direct, because there's this they feel like they can have conversations with me and there's like a shorthand because I understand what their role entails.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, for me, I feel like the only way I could see that applying is just more so because I'm always doing 5 billion things. It's hard to find time to like specialize. So like I've wanted since like last year to start learning Avid, because I know that's like the industry standard editing for a lot of people, like that's their editing software. But then my journalism training, as I was mentioning earlier, we use Adobe Premiere. So like I would now consider myself like pretty good with Adobe Premiere and how to edit with that. And like that's totally fine if you're doing like freelance editing, or sometimes if you're doing even like other like journalism or docs. That's usually kind of like what they kind of like to use as well. But then if you want to like elevate yourself and like be like an editor for more like scripted, like high-end projects, they usually do want you to have really good a good skill set, a good grasp of Avid. And like I've been wanting to learn Avid, but it's because I'm always doing like directing all of these other things. It's sort of just like my brain's like, I already know Adobe Premiere. I want to get this project out. Let me just do it because I already have like 5 million other things to do anyway. So I feel like that's kind of like the only, I guess, like trap. It's very much the whole like jack of all trades, like master of none thing, where it's like eventually you're gonna get to a point where you're like, I really need to actually focus on this one skill set so that I can sort of like get to the next level, especially like if it's more of like a passion project and not something that you currently have in works with like some bigger funding body. But then I feel like, when you're on like really, big projects or just like in general, like projects of other people, so projects that are not directly under your creative control, then yes, I do feel like, knowing how to specifically stick to your role. And I guess sort of like what Jack was saying, basically like also knowing like just when you can sort of use it, I guess, to like make the relationships easier. So like, as Jack was saying, in his case, knowing that he also directed before, he was able to sort of like build these relationships with these up and coming directors as an editor. And I feel like, yeah, that's kind of just sort of like the best way to do it, which is basically just like wield it and weaponize it in a way that's best for you and when you feel that's appropriate.
Wield it and weaponize it. I like that. That feels like it should be like the conclusive statement. But I do know that we are pretty much at the end of this conversation. It was great hearing about what you guys work on. It was great hearing about your processes, about what motivates you, about your roles, your roles within the industry, and the benefits and the not benefits of being a jack of all trades. And yeah, I think I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth and just say to the rest of you who are here and to us as well, whatever you want to do in the industry, whoever you want to be, if you want to be hyphenated or not, if you just want to be a single role, just go do it, just go do it. Do it where you're at with what you have. Just do it. Elizabeth, I think the floor is yours.
What a wonderful conclusion. And may I echo your comments, Natasha, and Jendayi, Jack and Natasha. Thank you so much for such an inspiring conversation. It was absolutely fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time for our talk this evening.